Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from Madrid in Spain in a very nice day. We are happy to be able to share with you the preliminary results of our study that we gave the name of a phase 2 randomized multicenter adaptive trial to evaluate the safety and immunogenicity of one dose of Comirnaty in subject that has received one dose of Vaccelerate. This is the title of the study that we did last April, May. In the title, you can see that appears the word adaptive. That is why we try to include and the possibility to include in the short future new arm treatments if we need it. But the results that we are going to show you today, which are preliminary, are from a classical randomized multicenter phase 2 control study. I am just going to briefly expose to you the context of the study, the protocol overview, the objectives, variables, and participants. And after my words, my introducing words, the main results in immunogenicity and reactogenicity will be presented by my colleagues from the National Center of Microbiology that has been working at Central Lab for this study. It is important to explain which is in the context of this study. When the Pharmacovigilance Committee of the EMA point in March, last month of March, the possible risk of Vaccelerate dose, in Spain, we had 2 million people already vaccinated with the first dose of the Astra vaccine. In that moment, our Ministry of Health gave them some time to decide, what was going to do with all this population already vaccinated with one dose of Astra vaccine, and in that moment, without the possibility to be vaccinated with a second dose. And they asked to the Instituto de Salud Carlos III to quickly design and develop a clinical trial to answer the question about the possibility to include a second dose of other vaccine. And in that moment, the best candidate was going to be the Pfizer Biontech vaccine to all this population. And we received the idea to go ahead with that study and coordinate the study since our hospital La Paz in Madrid. So we start to plan the study between 8 and 15 of April. The study was sent to the ethics committee in 15 of April. They approved it very quickly in a fast track way. We start the study, we start to recruit patients or participants in the 24th of April. That means 1 week later. And we finish the recruitment in just another week by the end of April. So our data or our study was based on some problems. The idea that the public health authorities were stopping the use of Vaccelerate in Spain. We have some idea about the possibility of doing heterologous schemes based in animal models, based in some cases and based in the previous experience with Sputnik and particularly in Ebola. Then we start a study, and we can do it as quickly as I told you, because in Spain we have a network of clinical trials unit composed by 34 clinical trials units all around the country that are already financed by the Instituto de Salud Carlos III. So we have 34 clinical trials units able to help in the development of clinical studies very quickly in Spain. I have to tell you that these 34 clinical trial units receive some funds from the ISCI, from the Instituto de Salud Carlos III, that it is absolutely and exclusively for personal cost. So in each of these 34 clinical trials unit, we have data managers, monitors, nurses, and other people needed for the developing and follow-up of clinical trials unit. One of the units is La Paz Hospital, that now is also at the same time the coordination unit of all the other 34 units in Spain. I have to say you that major interest of the SCREN, the national network, is to help in clinical trial or other type of studies with academic sponsors. But at the same time, I can tell you that if we feel that a project is useful or of interest for the national health system, we can also work with commercial proposals. Well, this is the protocol overview. As I told you, we select 660 patients in 1 week in 5 hospitals across Spain. We make a very pragmatic inclusion-exclusion criteria. We make baseline procedures useful in other clinical trials. We select, of course, those participants already vaccinated 8 to 12 weeks before with the first dose of Astra. We making them a PCR in a local laboratory, which was an inclusion criteria. We need to know it, but it is not being considered as an inclusion criteria. We have a first visit on day 7 and follow day 14, where the primary endpoint, day 28, month 3, 6, and 12. So we are going to follow all these participants during 1 year. We are now presenting results of day 14, but we have already received samples and we are already analyzing or just finalizing the analysis of results for day 28. The vaccine response was going to be measured by different endpoints different variables that I am going to show you now. And patients or participants were randomized in a ratio 2:1 to no vaccine or the second dose of vaccine in an heterologous scheme with the second dose of Combivac's. 1 month later, we has already vaccinated the control group. So we are going to find results at people already vaccinated between 8 and 12 weeks before with Astra, and another group with 4 weeks delay in the second vaccination. And we are going, of course, to measure safety during all the study. It is important to say that I told you that we are now analyzing the 28 days results. I have to tell you that the 5 hospitals working in this trial were chosen by inside the SCREN network by the coordination team, that it is Antonio Carcas, Alberto Borovia, and myself, but we are also the La Paz representatives in the Vaccelerate project, because these 5 hospitals were working or they have already finished their participation in other clinical trials with vaccines for COVID-19. So they had the expertise and they has personal training to do these trials. As I told you, they were acting as local laboratories for the selection criteria and the recruitment. But the National Center for Microbiology, another dependence of the Instituto de Salud Carlos III, has been acting during all the trial and are going to work for the next months as central laboratory for this study. So humoral immunity, neutralizing antibodies, and cellular immunity are going to be done in this central laboratory. The main objective of the study was humoral immunogenicity 14 days after the Comirnaty boost compared with individuals that had received a previous prime dose of Vaccelerate. The second main objective was safety or reactogenicity in 7 days, in the first 7 days after vaccination. The secondary objectives were neutralizing antibodies and cellular immunogenicity at 14 days, humoral immunogenicity 7 and 28 days, and long-term safety. We have also an exploratory objective, that is the evaluation of the relationship between immune response measured as neutralizing antibodies and antibodies against the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 virus. Another objective of clinical is to assess the occurrence of symptomatic molecular confirmed and severity signs and symptoms of the in subjects that receive the doses in our study. As you can see, our variables, endpoints, and immunoassays are the anti-RBD antibodies and IgG Trimeric, two methods to measure the main objective. Also, the unsolicited events during the 7 days that has been received by an electronic diary. And the secondary objectives and variables has been the neutralizing antibody titers and the cellular immune response measured by interferon gamma. We include 678 patients for eligibility. 676 were enrolled in the study and randomized 2-to-1. 450 were assigned to experimental group and 226 to control group. Reminds that it is a group to be vaccinated 28 days later. Finally, at day 14, we have 448 completed participants already vaccinated and 25 completed that can act as a control. 441 participants included in the immunological analysis according to an intent to treat idea, and 448 for safety. And in the control group, 222 include in the intention to treat analysis, none for safety, because in this moment they were not already vaccinated when I prepared this slide. We stratify all those 660 participants according to hospital, between the 5 hospitals, gender, and 2 groups of age, one from 18 to 49 years, another one from 50 to 59 years. As you can see there is no differences in between both groups, excepting in the ratio male-female, that in all groups of age, in both groups of age, are higher in the female group. That's why, because in Spain, there are more people vaccinated with Astra, first dose, between the females, but because many of them were teaching and workers in the sanitary systems. Also, you can see down in the bottom, in the last 2 files, you can see that according to the 8, 9, or 10, 12 previous weeks of vaccination with the first dose of Astra, we have also presented results. So, the immunological results are going to be presented here now. I introduce Dr. Jose Alcami. He is responsible for the immunopathology laboratory of the National Microbiology Center in Spain, and I think he's going to present results. Pepe, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, everybody, for this kind invitation. So, we assess the humoral immunity, the production and quality of antibodies with 3 different tests. As Jesus mentioned, the main objective of the study was to the levels of antibodies targeting the receptor binding domain. And for that, we use electrochemiluminescence test from Roche. And the secondary objective was the detection of antibodies against the trimeric protein, trimeric spike protein. So in the first case is whole immunoglobulins, and in the second one is IgG only. The third test we performed was a neutralizing antibody test. I will explain the methodology in another slide. So here you have the results of the main objective. Is the level of antibodies targeting the receptor binding domain. In blue, you have the control group of 222 patients, and in red, the interventional group, people that were immunized with the Pfizer dose. And as you can see, at day 7, already we have a sharp increase in the level of antibodies targeting the receptor binding domain. And in the table, in the last column, you can see the fold change. At day 7, there was an increase of 48 times in fold change and 77 times at day 14 as compared to the control group. So there was this clear increase in the primary objective of the study, starting at day 7 and reaching the top at day 14. The second parameter was the evaluation to quantify the antibody levels against the trimeric spike protein. And we detected IgG in this test. And again, you can see that at day 7, there was this strong increase in antibody levels in the immunized group with the second dose of Pfizer vaccine. In the table, you have the fold change that in this case was 36 fold increase as compared to the non-vaccinated or control group. Here you have the pseudovirus neutralization assay we use in the centralized laboratory at the National Center of Microbiology. Our platform, we have a large experience with detecting neutralizing antibodies against HIV. So what we did was to transform this platform to detect neutralizing antibodies against the SARS-CoV-2. Well, the methodology is classical. It's just to clone the spike, the DNA from the spike in a expression vector under the control of the CMV promoter, and we co-transfect in a producer cell line with a defective clone of HIV that include a renal luciferase gene as a reporter. So that made very easy to measure the neutralization. So after transfection, we generate a virus, a viral stock that we use to transfect Vero E6 cells that express high levels of the ACE2 receptor. So the test is performed in 10 by duplicate with 10 dilutions in 4-fold dilutions, and as a negative control, we use another virus non-related with SARS coronavirus. In this case, the stomatitis vesicular virus envelope. And then we determine the ID50 48 hours after infection of the cells in the presence of the sera dilution of the different individuals included in the study. So in next slide, you can have the results from neutralizing titers. Neutralizing titers were very low at baseline, which is what has been described after the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we were in the same range. And after vaccination with the Pfizer vaccine, you can see this increase in the titers of neutralizing antibodies with a fold of 45 fold increase in this titer of neutralization. In this table, that's interesting because here we compare just in the interventional group the increase in different baseline levels. I mean, we had many patients that were negative in our test or at very low levels of neutralizing titers at baseline, and all of them, including those with high neutralizing titer at baseline, increase after the vaccination, the ratio or the fold increase between day 14 and baseline. So this is the fold increase in the different ranges at baseline, and you can see that there is a clear increase even in those with high titers at baseline. We performed this test in 1/3 of all the patients, 69 patients in control group and 129 patients in the interventional group, because we have to provide this data in 1 week. And so 1/3 of patients was enough to take robust conclusions. But we have material to check for all the cohort if required. So the results in summary show that the primary and secondary objectives were reached in this study. Both the antibodies targeting the receptor binding domain, antibodies target the trimeric spike form, and neutralizing antibody titers in patients or in volunteers vaccinated with the Pfizer vaccine. So I think next slide, I think we have the correlation. We had a very good correlation between the titer of neutralizing antibodies and the antibodies against the receptor binding domain with an R square of 0.8 to 4. And so we have a very good correlation between among the 3 different tests we use in this study. So that's all for the humoral immunity part. And I introduce now my colleague Jordi Cano. Jordi is the head of the Immunology Reference Lab at Instituto Carlos III, and is also the national contact point and Spanish coordinator in Vaccelerate. And he will show you the results of cellular immunity in this study. Jordi?
Thanks, Pepe. So, as you know, I lead the work package 6.2 cellular immunity under the work package 6, which is led by Jean Daniel and Ole. So we've been working on protocols to study T-cell immunity in response to COVID vaccination. So what you can see at the bottom is the experimental approach that we use. So basically, we take whole blood. So it was taken a separate tube from humoral immunity, neutralizing antibodies, and serology. So we take a different tube. Not much blood is needed. 5 milliliters it's enough, and then we culture overnight with different peptides, S protein, and just to ensure that the people that were enrolled, they didn't have previous infections. So these are naive and non-infected people. And we have a control with DMSO that we stimulate, and then we subtract from the data. We collect the plasma, as mentioned and as discussed several times in the work package 6, and we have a readout. In this case, is interferon gamma by ELISA. So we look at 155 patients overall, and we took these patients from the local hospitals. That was from Madrid. And what you can see in blue is the control group, and in red is the people that were vaccinated with the second dose of Pfizer. There is a four-fold increase in the production of interferon gamma. So this is our conclusion, that the second dose of Pfizer increases cellular immunity. So although it's difficult to compare because we didn't have an arm, AstraZeneca, we know what has been published. As you can see here, there are 3 papers that come from the Oxford group, in which they show in different studies that the second dose, as you can see, the first one, that's when the second dose, the boost of the second dose of AstraZeneca was given. And this is measuring interferon gamma. So we're measuring the same parameter, but this is measuring ELISpot in PBMC. So that's different, and I'll mention this in a minute. But what you can see in these 3 studies is that there was not an increase in cellular immunity, right? It was a different technology measuring the same thing, interferon gamma. Interestingly, in the second paper that you see in the middle, it was followed the same vaccination scheme. It was 56 days, 8 weeks, followed by, that was when the second vaccination was given. And then 14 days after, day 70, they measured cellular immunity again. There was no increase in interferon gamma production by PBMCs using ELISpot. And in the third manuscript, basically, they confirmed that this happened independently of any age study that you were looking at. So there is a clinical trial that also, manuscript that also used whole blood, and they compare PBMCs versus whole blood stimulation, and they look at interferon gamma. And what you can see is that you can see in red the patients that are monitored using whole blood. It seems to be more sensitive than PBMCs. Again, PBMCs don't have neutrophils, and it's likely that the stimulation is not as complete as you can do with whole blood. So it is something that obviously we need to discuss internally with the work package 6, with Jean Daniel, and with Ole. But it seems that this whole blood assay might be more sensitive than PBMCs. Obviously, there are limitations with both the studies, but moving forward, this is something that we need to consider. So that's the part for cellular immunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordi. And just to finish, the second main objective of the study was, of course, adverse events, reactogenicity, measuring during the 7 days post-vaccination. As you can see here, you can find local events and systemic events. Most of the patient, 88% of the participants has an injections had pain. Nearly half of the participants, 44.4%, has a headache. Another important events were swelling, malaise, some kind of chills, nausea, and so on. Events not very different that others already published in the CombivacS study and in other vaccination programs. Next slide, please, Marta. As you can see here, most of these events appeared very early during the first and the second day, and most of them were of short duration. Most disappeared during the third day. Next slide, please. And very little figures were of moderate and severe events. Most of them were mild. Nearly 30% were moderate. Only 20 cases were severe, but none of them required hospitalization. And you can see here that we could be able to find some difference between genders in the population, being more frequent, nearly every kind of event occurs in females than in males, but we are going to analyze this much more clearly and with time, because we will like to find some explanation for this, but the data shows more presence of event events in females. And so to finalize the conclusion of our study, I have to tell you that the preprint of the paper is already for you in the web. You can see it. And it's a pleasure for me to say you that since last Monday, we know that the paper has been already accepted in Lancet and will be published very soon. So you have to understand that we have been very cautious with other conclusions, and I'm going to show you our conclusions in the same way that we have written in the paper. In our idea, in summary, our study shows a 14-day robust humoral and cellular immune response after a second dose of Pfizer Biontech vaccine in individuals primed with Astra vaccine between 8 and 12 weeks before. Because the trial is ongoing, further findings will complete these initial results, and future studies compare homologous versus heterologous vaccination schedules will allow direct comparisons. But in any case, our data will help to confirm and better understand the humoral and cellular immune response observed in this trial, as well as substantiate COVID-19 vaccination decision-making. This work is funded and sponsored by the Instituto Carlos III, an Spanish public body assigned to the Ministry of Science and Innovation. Also, the Spanish Clinical Trial Platform is a public network funded by the ISTI. Also, I would like to express the gratitude for the contribution of the trial participants, 676 Spanish people who agreed to participate very quickly in our study. Also to the advice of the International Data Safety Monitoring Board and the Clinical Steering Committee, as well as Vaccelerate, the European Corona Vaccine Trial Accelerator platform that has been given an umbrella to this trial. Thank you very much to all of the participants and all of you to be with us in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Jesus, this is Burj. I wish I could applause, but in real. But my congratulations. This is really fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I suppose that should be some questions and ideas to increase and to make better our future adaptive inclusions arms or ideas. I am expecting to hear your opinions, please.
There's one question.
Fiona, are you going to moderate?
I was just trying to, yes.
Yeah.
Robert was raising his hand. Yes, please.
Yes, Robert Frischek from Poland. Are you consider, first of all, congratulations for this study. It's a very important data, and congratulations for expecting a Lancet publication. Are you considering to compare your data from the active arm with any historic data of patients who received 2 doses of AstraZeneca?
Yes, we are considering that. When we started the study, we discussed about the possibility to include an experimental arm with the 2 doses of Astra. But in that moment, there were only 70 patients already vaccinated with the 2 doses of Astra in Spain. And at that moment was probably very unpopular and maybe unethical to include a prospective arm. Now we are thinking, and probably we will do, because now in Spain there are many patients that has been included in a second dosing of Astra. So we are thinking in that. Maybe, as you said, by means of a control historical arm, maybe. But we are considering. Thank you for your suggestion.
Jean-Daniel also raised his hand.
Yes, thanks a lot, and bravo for the results. I have the same question with a control arm with the 2 doses of the Pfizer, and are you going to analyze the neutralizing antibody against all the variants with all these strategies?
Pepe, you are mute.
Okay, sorry. Salud, Jean-Daniel. Happy to you. How are you? Yes, actually, we are this week. We are in the process of checking the activity of neutralization against different variants. No, we have done in the first set the UK, the South Africa, and we will do the Indian variants, 2 Indian variants in next couple of weeks.
Are you going to compare it with the 2 shots of Pfizer? Is it possible for you? Because it's easier to obtain the samples from those patients that, as mentioned before, the samples from the 2 AstraZeneca.
Yeah, you're right. The only problem is that we need to get samples from the Pfizer patients more or less at the same time, because of the potential decrease in antibodies or neutralizing activity. But obviously, I think is the work to be done. Thank you.
Pierre van Dam has also raised his hand.
Yes, thank you, and congratulations for such a nice trial. Well done. The question I have is, I was looking at the report from the ECDC on the use of AstraZeneca in the respective EU countries. And you can imagine that your study, Jesus, creates a lot of questions in many European countries among vaccinees, in particular people who received the first AstraZeneca vaccine, and they now all want to get a Pfizer vaccine, a second dose. So I was looking at the policy in Spain, and I was wondering, what do you do with the second dose policy now for those who received AstraZeneca as a first dose? And I see in the ECDC document that it is under consideration and that the second dose is now extended, or the interval is extended for more data on mixed schedules. So I would like to understand, what does that mean in terms of very practical policy for the moment in Spain? What do you do with those who received the first dose of AstraZeneca? Do you offer them automatically the second dose after 12 weeks? Do you continue to extend that interval? What is the policy for the moment?
Pierre, you are making us a very difficult question to be resolved.
Sorry for that.
No.
It was
as you know, we are civil servants of the Spanish country. We do not take part in the political decisions. And I am using a word that I don't like it very much when I say political decision. When we publish our data, or we make public our data, The Spanish Ministry of Health has a clear recommendation to change the second dose of Astra to the second dose of Pfizer. But there were a completely unexpected consequences in the media that the ministry and the local regional sanitary authorities give the opportunity to the patients or participants already vaccinated with the first dose of Astra to choose themselves which is going to be the second dose, Astra or Pfizer, non-Moderna. I had to tell you that, surprisingly for me, with the data that we have, most of the patient has been choosing again the second dose of Astra. And we do not know that any problem has appeared in our population. So in Spain, most of the patients with the first dose of Astra are receiving the second dose of Astra for the moment. But as you has said, maybe in a short future, the European recommendation about the second dose of Astra will change. We don't know that. So for the moment, we are expecting about that. I don't know if I has answered at least partially your question.
Absolutely, and I think it's very clear what you said, indeed, to try to make the difference between a scientific conclusion and a political decision. I think we are all faced with that from morning till evening when we get journalists asking questions. And I like also the way how prudent you were in phrasing the conclusions of your study. In particular, that one slide that you showed, I think is very correct. It's a very, that's the evidence that you show, and you can't go further than that. And I think that is what I also appreciate in the paper, is to be very prudent in such conclusions. No, thank you very, very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Pierre, for your comments.
Galia wanted to comment also. You're still on mute.
Yeah, thanks. I have two comments. The first one is, I think it will be very interesting to know the durability of the humoral and the cellular response, compared to the 2 doses of Pfizer, 2 doses of AstraZeneca. What we see now, and it's very interesting in healthcare worker in my hospital, is that we really see, real decrease in the RBD IgG. However, the neutralizing antibody are quite nice. So the antibody is quite functional, however, the titers are really dropping down. So I'd like to know if you have any idea about it. And the second question, I've seen quite a lot of people who get the paresthesia after the Pfizer vaccine. And I don't see any paresthesia in your adverse event. Have you seen it?
Pepe, are you going to comment the first question?
Yes, thank you, Galia. I think it's a very important point, because now we are checking that. I mean, in the study, you could see in the follow-up, we have a follow-up now 1 month after vaccination, after immunization, 3, 6, and 1 year. So we will check the potential decay, the levels of RBD and antibodies, and also neutralizing antibodies. Recently, it has been published a paper in Nature from the Michel Nussensreich group, and they state that that could be related with your question, that the titer and the potency of neutralizing antibodies increase with time. It looks like a maturation in plasmatic and B cells that made this compartment more, the capacity to produce more robust antibodies. And Michel Nussensreich showed that the antibodies that are produced 6 months after immunization or after natural infection increase their avidity for the different epitopes. So that could explain this paradox, apparent paradox of decrease in the levels of quantitative antibodies and the increase in the qualitative effect. I think we will be able to check this possibility in our trial.
And about the paresthesia, do you have Somebody
No.
has experience with it?
Galia, we didn't recognize the paresthesia as any of our solicited adverse events. So between the solicited one, we cannot know if we have or not. And for the unsolicited, we haven't finalized the analysis. I will check it, and of course we will tell you. But since my point of view, it is not easy to discriminate between wording of some type of solicited, unsolicited adverse events. For example, we have an 88% of participants who have what we call an injection site discomfort. Maybe discomfort means, of course, for a clinician is not paresthesia, but I cannot tell you more than that for a moment. Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, I think the other hands are the old ones that we still have. Are there any other questions or comments?
So I have a short question. Thank you very much, Jesus, and to the team, of course, for this very nice and extremely interesting study. So very well done. Just a quick question. Of course, it's difficult for you to say because you didn't have the comparator group, but in the UK study, it looked like in the heterologous group, they had something like 3 times as many adverse events, all mild, but still reported compared to the homologous group. Of course, you cannot say because you didn't have the comparator group, but what is your feeling? Are you sensing that you also had more adverse events reported?
You see, Ole, I don't like to compare because, as you said, we are not a real comparative group for those aspects. But I feel that most of the adverse events are quite similar. And if I think in the frequency, I'm not sure, but most of the events in the CONCOV study from Oxford were something that they call feveriness, which is some kind of sensation of fever without, not thermometrated. I'm not sure that if you separate all those patients with feveriness, you can compare the results with our results. I think that are very similar. And don't forget that the time between the second doses has been different in their study and in our. In our study is only the 7 days after the second heterologous dose. I think they have less time than that. So I don't like to make comparisons, but if you ask me really, I think that probably our results are close and similar.
There's one more raised hand, which I just saw. There's no name. It's called iPad.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Fiona. This is Burj.
That's you. Sorry.
That's from Ekrin. Just one quick question in terms of logistics. How did you get the Pfizer Biontech vaccine?
Well, the ISTI, the National Institute of Instituto de Salud Carlos III, is depending of the Ministry of Science and Innovation. So we contact with the Spanish Agency of Medicines, and they give us the doses, sending directly from the general store of the ministry to the 5 hospitals. In fact, we were already vaccinating in that moment in some of these 5 hospitals with Pfizer vaccines, but I can answer your question telling you that the Spanish Agency of Medicines provide the vaccines to the hospitals directly.
I see. So I assume that ensuring participants was necessary.
No, because according to the European Clinical Trials Directive, there is a proposal that we can introduce our study under the label of minor intervention is in English, or minimal risk studies. I don't know, I can't remember which is the official name, but there is a type of, there is a label for these minimal risk intervention clinical trials. So we ask these questions to the ethics committee, And they considered with us that this study was of minimal risk for the participants, and we didn't make any type of insurance to make the study.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jesus.
Great. I think that's it for questions and comments. Jesus, would you like to conclude your webinar?
Well, just a conclusion is a good and a very nice opportunity to share with all of you that we are starting to be friends. So it's a pleasure for me to be able to help, and maybe in the light of these results, we can continue thinking and working in our next Vaccelerate clinical trials just when they finish the summertime. So thank you to all for your participation, for your questions, and for your congratulations. And I feel happy to be with my group in Spain and with all my colleagues from the Instituto de Salud Carlos III, because I think that we are a nice group for continue working. Thank you very much to all you participants.